I stood outside that hospital room, clutching a teddy bear I'd picked out weeks ago, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, had just given birth to my first grandchild, and I was supposed to be in there, holding that baby, feeling the weight of new life in my arms. But instead, I was out here in the hallway, like some stranger banned from the moment I dreamed about for years. Sophia's words to my son Douglas echoed in my head. "Your mom isn't allowed in the room. She can't hold the baby. She can't take pictures." And Douglas, my own son, the boy I'd raised single-handedly after his dad walked out, just went along with it. He didn't fight for me. He didn't stand up and say, "That's my mom, and she deserves to be here." He just nodded and let her shut me out. I was standing there, frozen, staring at the closed door, hearing the muffled sounds of nurses and that tiny cry I so desperately wanted to be closer to, and I felt this rage bubbling up, mixed with a grief so heavy I could barely breathe. Hello, I'm Madison. I'm 52 years old from North Carolina. Before I dive into this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means everything. I'd spent months preparing for this baby. I'd knitted blankets, soft little ones in pale yellow, because they didn't want to know the gender. I'd bought that teddy bear from a boutique downtown, not some cheap thing from a big box store, because I wanted it to be special, something the baby could hold on to for years. I'd even helped Douglas and Sophia with money for the crib when they were short, because that's what you do for family. But none of that mattered. Sophia had made up her mind about me long before this day, and I didn't even know why. I kept replaying every interaction we'd had, trying to figure out where I went wrong. Was it something I said at the baby shower? Was it the way I offered advice about breastfeeding because I'd done it with Douglas and thought I could help? Or was it just that she didn't want me in their lives? Period, I didn't have answers, but standing there in that hallway, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this break me. The hospital was busy with nurses rushing past and other families coming and going, but to me it felt like the world had stopped. I could see through the small window in the door, just a sliver of the room. Sophia was in the bed, looking exhausted, but smug like she'd won some kind of battle. Douglas was next to her, holding the baby wrapped in a white blanket, and he wouldn't even look up to meet my eyes. I wanted to bang on that door to scream, "I'm your mother. I have a right to be here." But I didn't. I just stood there, gripping that teddy bear so tight, my knuckles turned white, feeling like I was being erased from my own family. A nurse walked by and gave me a pitying look, like she knew exactly what was going on. "You okay, hon?" she asked softly. I nodded, because what else could I do? I wasn't going to spill my guts to a stranger in a hallway. But inside, I was screaming. I wanted to tell her how I'd raised Douglas on my own, how I'd worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, how I'd been there for every scraped knee and every heartbreak. And now here I was shut out of the most important moment of his life because his wife decided I didn't belong. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. My legs were aching, but I couldn't make myself leave. I kept hoping Douglas would come out and say, "Mom, I'm sorry. Come in and meet your granddaughter." Because by then, I'd heard a nurse mention it was a girl. A little girl. My heart swelled at the thought, but it also broke because I didn't even know her name. I was so close to her physically, just a door between us, but it might as well have been a million miles. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking with anger and hurt, and I took a selfie right there in the hallway. Me and that teddy bear with the closed door in the background. I opened Facebook and typed out a post. "Welcome to the world, baby. Your grandma was here, even if they didn't want me to be." I hit post before I could second-guess myself, and the second I did, I felt this rush like I'd taken back a tiny piece of my power. I wasn't going to let them pretend I didn't exist. I was here. I showed up. And I wasn't going to let Sophia's cruelty erase that. The post blew up almost immediately. Friends from church coworkers, old neighbors, all commenting with support. "That's awful, Madison. You don't deserve this. What kind of person does that to a grandma? Stay strong. You're in the right." Each notification was like a little spark, keeping my anger alive, but also reminding me I wasn't alone. People saw me. They saw what was happening, and they were on my side. But then I saw a comment from Douglas's cousin Lisa Maddie call me. "This isn't okay." And that's when I realized this wasn't just about me and Sophia anymore. This was going to ripple through the whole family. I didn't call Lisa right away. I was too raw, too caught up in the moment. Instead, I sat down on a bench in the hallway, still holding that teddy bear, and I let myself cry. Not loud, sobs, just quiet tears streaming down my face, because I didn't want anyone to notice. I kept thinking about how I'd imagined this day. Me in the room holding my granddaughter, singing her a lullaby the way I used to with Douglas. I'd pictured Sophia and me laughing together, maybe even bonding over this new life. But that fantasy was gone, shattered by her cold words and Douglas's silence. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Douglas. "Mom, why'd you post that? You're making this harder than it needs to be." I stared at those words, my blood boiling. Making it harder. For who? For him? For Sophia? What about me? What about the fact that I was standing out here alone while they played happy family inside? I wanted to text back something sharp, something that would cut him the way he'd cut me. But I didn't. I just turned off my phone and shoved it in my purse. I wasn't ready to deal with him yet. Instead, I got up and walked to the hospital gift shop. I don't know why, but I needed to do something, anything to keep from falling apart. I bought a little pink onesie with Grandma's Girl written on it, because even if I couldn't hold her, I wanted something to mark this moment. The cashier smiled at me and said, "First grandchild." I nodded, forcing a smile back, but inside I was screaming. Yes, and I'm not even allowed to see her. I took the onesie back to the bench and tucked it into my bag next to the teddy bear, feeling like I was collecting pieces of a moment I wasn't allowed to have. By the time I left the hospital, it was dark outside. I drove home in silence, the teddy bear sitting in the passenger seat, like a reminder of everything I'd lost that day. When I got home, I didn't even turn on the lights. I just sat on the couch, staring at that Facebook post, watching the likes and comments pile up. Some people were saying I should have fought harder, should have pushed my way into the room, but they didn't understand. I wasn't going to beg for a place in my own family. I had too much pride for that. But pride didn't make the pain go away. It didn't fill the hole where my granddaughter's weight should have been in my arms. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing that closed door in my mind, hearing Sophia's voice laying down her rules. I kept wondering what I'd done to make her hate me this much. Was it because I'd been too involved? Too excited? Or was it something deeper? Something I couldn't even guess at? I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing: this wasn't over. I wasn't going to let Sophia and Douglas push me out of my granddaughter's life. I didn't know how I was going to fight back, but I was going to find a way. Because that little girl deserved to know her grandma, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. Or from me. The morning after the hospital, my phone was a war zone notifications from that Facebook post, pouring in like a flood I couldn't control. Friends, family, even people I hadn't seen since high school were commenting, messaging, calling with their takes on what happened. Most were on my side, saying Sophia's way out of line, or Douglas needs to stand up for you. It felt good to have that support, like a lifeline pulling me out of the hurt. But then there were the others, the ones that cut deep like a knife. Sophia's aunt posted, "Maybe there's a reason they kept you out." Madison and I couldn't stop staring at it. A reason? What reason? I hadn't done anything but love my son and try to be there for his family. I wanted to fire back to demand, she explained herself, but I knew it would just feed the drama. So I scrolled past, focusing on the messages that lifted me up, trying to drown out the doubt creeping in. By noon, my sister Karen called from Raleigh, her voice all fire and no filter. "Maddie, I saw that post, and I'm ready to drive down there and knock some sense into Douglas. How dare they treat you like this? You need to call him right now and lay it all out." I told her about his text, how he'd said I was making things harder, and she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Harder for him? What about you? You're his mom. He's got no right to let Sophia pull this." Karen's always been my anchor, the one who says what I'm too scared to admit, and hearing her rage on my behalf gave me a spark of courage. She said she'd be at my place by the weekend to help me figure out the next step, and just knowing she was coming made the weight on my chest a little lighter. But before Karen could even pack her bags, things got uglier. Sophia saw the post and sent me a text that felt like a slap across the face. "Madison, your little online stunt was desperate. You're trying to turn everyone against me, but you're the one stirring up trouble. Stay out of our lives." I read it over and over, my pulse racing with fury. Desperate. She'd locked me out of my granddaughter's birth, and I was the desperate one. I wanted to text back to tell her she didn't get to rewrite the story, but I knew it would just give her more ammo. Instead, I sent the text to Karen, who called me back in seconds. "She's trying to scare you into backing down. Don't you dare let her win." Karen was right, but it wasn't just Sophia I had to deal with. Douglas called that afternoon, and before I could say a word, he started in, "Mom, you need to delete that post. You're embarrassing, me and Sophia. This isn't a reality show." I couldn't believe it. Embarrassing him, I took a deep breath and said, "Douglas, I'm your mother. I was there for you every single day of your life, and now you're letting Sophia erase me. How do you think that makes me feel?" He went quiet for a long moment, then said, "I don't know what to do, Mom. She's my wife." And that was it. He'd chosen her. The boy I'd raised was slipping away, and it felt like my heart was being carved out. I didn't cry after that call. I was too mad. I started cleaning my house like it was a mission, scrubbing every surface, vacuuming every corner, anything to keep my body moving while my mind spun. I kept thinking about how I'd taught Douglas to be strong to do what's right, but here he was letting Sophia call the shots. I'd been there for him, through everything: his first heartbreak, his high school graduation, the time he crashed my car, and I didn't even yell. And now he couldn't give me a single moment with my granddaughter. It wasn't just unfair, it was wrong, and I wasn't going to let it stand. When Karen arrived on Saturday, she walked in with a bottle of wine and a fire in her eyes. "We're fixing this, Maddie," she said, pouring us glasses. "But first, you need to know what you're fighting for. Do you want to be in that baby's life? Or are you ready to walk away?" I didn't hesitate. "I want to be her grandma. I don't care what Sophia thinks. That baby deserves to know me." Karen nodded, and we spent the night mapping out a plan. She suggested a letter to Douglas, not a text or email, but a real handwritten one where I could pour out everything. She thought it might hit him harder, make him see what he was doing to me. So, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen and paper and wrote it all down. I told him how much I loved him, how I'd always been proud of him. I wrote about the hospital, how it felt to be shut out, not just from that moment, but from his whole family. I mentioned the teddy bear, the onesie, the dreams I had for my granddaughter. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I wasn't mean either. I just wanted him to feel what I felt. When I finished, it was 3 pages long and my hand ached, but I felt like I'd finally said something real. I mailed it the next day, hoping it would reach him in a way my words hadn't. A few days later, Lisa, Douglas's cousin, called wanting to meet for coffee. When we sat down at a little diner downtown, she didn't waste time. "Sophia's been trashing you for months," she said, stirring her coffee. "She's telling everyone you're controlling, that you're trying to take over her life. That's why she banned you from the hospital." I was floored. Controlling. I'd gone out of my way to give them space, to only help when they asked. Lisa said she didn't buy Sophia's stories, but she thought I needed to know what was being said. It was like a light bulb went off. Sophia wasn't just mad at me, she was building a case against me, painting me as the bad guy to justify her actions. I thanked Lisa and drove home, my mind racing. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. Sophia had a plan, and I was her target. That night, I sat on my couch, staring at the teddy bear, still sitting there like a symbol of everything I'd lost. I realized I couldn't just wait for Douglas to come around. I needed to fight back, not with anger, but with strategy. I started researching grandparents' rights in North Carolina, spending hours online, reading about court cases and laws. I found out it wasn't easy to win visitation, but it wasn't impossible either. I needed a lawyer, someone who knew family law and wouldn't back down. I called a friend from church who recommended Cheryl a family attorney with a reputation for being tough but fair. I set up a meeting for the next week, feeling like I was finally taking control. The fallout from the post didn't stop, though. Sophia's friends started commenting, defending her, saying I was crossing boundaries and making it all about me. One of them sent me a private message. "You need to respect Sophia's choices. She's the mom." I showed it to Karen, who rolled her eyes. "They're just parroting her lies. Keep your eyes on the prize." But it stung because it felt like Sophia was rallying an army against me, and I was out here with just Karen and a few supporters. I stopped checking Facebook, as much muting the notifications to keep my head clear. I had to focus on the fight ahead, not the noise online. When I met Cheryl, she listened to my story, the hospital, the post Sophia's text, Douglas's silence, and took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "Madison, you've got a case, but it's not a slam dunk. Grandparents' rights in North Carolina are tough to win unless there's a clear reason, like a custody dispute. But we can argue Sophia's cutting you out for no good reason and that it's not in the child's best interest." She explained, "We'd need to prove my bond with Douglas and show I'd be a positive influence on the baby." It felt overwhelming, but Cheryl's confidence gave me hope. I hired her on the spot, and she started working on a petition to file with the court. For the first time since the hospital, I felt like I had a real chance to fight back. Meeting Cheryl lit a fire in me, but it also made everything feel more real. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. It was a legal battle, and I was stepping into uncharted territory. Cheryl explained, we'd need to gather evidence to show I'd been a big part of Douglas's life, and that excluding me was hurting my granddaughter. She suggested collecting photos, letters, anything that showed I was a good mom and would be a good grandma. I spent days digging through old boxes, pulling out memories that were both sweet and painful. There were pictures of Douglas and me at the beach when he was 6, him grinning with a missing tooth. I found a card he'd made in 3rd grade, saying "Best Mom Ever" in crooked crayon letters. There was a note from his college years thanking me for helping with his tuition. Each one was a reminder of what we'd had, and what I was fighting to keep. While I worked on that, I kept trying to reach Douglas. I called him a few times, leaving voicemails that were calm but firm. "Douglas, I just want to talk. I want to be part of your daughter's life. Please don't push me away." He didn't answer, but one day, he texted me a photo of the baby. No name, no message, just her tiny face in a white blanket. She had his eyes, and I stared at that picture for hours, feeling love and anger crashing together. Why send me this? If he wasn't going to let me see her, was he trying to keep me hanging on, or was it a crack in his armor? I didn't know, but I printed the photo and stuck it on my fridge, a daily reminder of what I was fighting for. The Facebook drama kept simmering. Sophia's friends were still commenting, saying I was disrespecting her rights as a mother, and I should back off. It was like they were reading from a script she'd written. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard when I knew Sophia was out there twisting the story. Then I got a call from my cousin Brenda, who'd seen the post and wanted to check in. She said she'd heard from mutual friends that Sophia was telling people I'd been overbearing at the baby shower, insisting on my way for everything. I was stunned. I'd helped plan the shower, sure, but I'd asked Sophia's opinion on every detail, from the cake to the decorations. If anything, I'd been too careful not to step on her toes. Brenda said she believed me, but it was clear Sophia's lies were spreading, and I needed to be ready for more pushback. Cheryl set a date for a preliminary hearing and warned me it would just be to lay out the case, not make any big decisions. Still, I was nervous as I walked into the courthouse, my palms sweaty, my heart racing. Douglas and Sophia were there sitting across the room with their lawyer, a guy in a sharp suit who looked like he charged by the minute. Douglas wouldn't meet my eyes, but Sophia glared at me like I was the one who'd wronged her. When the judge asked why I was seeking visitation, I stood up and said, "Your Honor, I've been there for my son his whole life. I love my granddaughter, and I want to be in her life. My daughter-in-law is cutting me out for no reason, and it's not fair to me or the child." My voice shook, but I got it out. Sophia's lawyer argued, I was creating conflict, and that Sophia had the right to choose who was around her baby. Cheryl countered that I had a strong bond with Douglas, and that excluding me was baseless. The judge set a date for a full hearing, and I left feeling drained, but determined. After the hearing, I saw Douglas and Sophia in the parking lot. I couldn't stop myself. I walked over and said, "Douglas, can we talk?" Just for a minute. Sophia stepped in front of him and snapped, "We've got nothing to say, Madison." But Douglas touched her arm and said, "Soph, let me handle this." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes, maybe guilt, maybe regret. He said, "Mom, I don't want to fight you, but Sophia's my wife and I have to stand by her." I wanted to yell that he was choosing her over me, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just want to know my granddaughter." He didn't say anything else, just walked away with Sophia, and I stood there in the parking lot, feeling like I'd lost another piece of him. Back home, I threw myself into preparing for the case. Cheryl had me write a detailed timeline of my relationship with Douglas from his childhood to now highlighting every way I'd supported him. I included the time I'd driven 3 hours to pick him up from college when his car broke down, the way I'd helped him and Sophia with rent when they were starting out. It was exhausting, but it also reminded me why I was doing this. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for my granddaughter to have a grandma who loved her. Karen helped me organize everything, scanning photos, making copies, keeping me focused when I started to spiral. She also reached out to other family members to see who'd back me up. Most were supportive, but some stayed neutral, saying they didn't want to take sides. It hurt, but I got it. This was messy, and not everyone wanted to wade into the drama. Then Lisa called with more news. She'd overheard Sophia talking at a family barbecue, saying she was done with Madison's interference and planned to limit all family contact with me, even outside of the baby. It was like Sophia wasn't just cutting me out of Lily's life, she was trying to erase me from the whole family. Lisa said she'd testify if I needed her to tell the court what Sophia was saying. I thanked her, feeling a mix of gratitude and dread. This was bigger than I'd thought, and I was starting to realize Sophia wouldn't stop unless I fought with everything I had. Cheryl suggested I meet with a mediator before the full hearing to see if we could settle out of court. I was skeptical, but agreed, hoping maybe Douglas would show up and talk. The mediation was a disaster. Sophia sat there, arms crossed, saying I'd blown everything out of proportion with the Facebook post and that I was trying to control her family. I said, "Sophia, I just want to be a grandma. I've never tried to control you." She rolled her eyes and said, "You're always in our business." Douglas barely spoke, just sat there looking miserable. The mediator tried to find middle ground, but Sophia wouldn't budge and I wasn't going to agree to being shut out. We left with nothing resolved, but Cheryl said it was okay. It showed the court we'd tried to be reasonable. As the hearing got closer, I started feeling the strain. I wasn't sleeping well, waking up at 3 in the morning, thinking about what could go wrong. What if the judge sided with Sophia? What if I never got to hold my granddaughter? Karen stayed over a few nights to keep me grounded, bringing over takeout and old movies to distract me. She kept saying, "You're doing the right thing, Maddie. Don't let fear stop you." Her support kept me going, but I was scared. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about a little girl I loved and hadn't even met. The weeks before the full hearing were a roller coaster of hope and fear. Cheryl was building a solid case, gathering statements from people who could vouch for me. My pastor wrote a letter calling me a cornerstone of our church, always volunteering for events. My old coworker sent a note about how I'd mentored younger staff, showing my nurturing side. Lisa agreed to testify about Sophia's lies, how she'd been bad-mouthing me to anyone who'd listen. It felt good to have this team behind me, but I was still terrified. What if it wasn't enough? What if Sophia's lawyer twisted everything and made me look like the problem? Douglas was still distant, but he started texting more small things, like baby's doing okay, or another photo of her, this time in a little hat. I clung to those messages because they were my only link to her. I still didn't know her name, which was like a constant ache, but I didn't push him. I was afraid he'd pull back completely if I did. Instead, I saved every photo, every text, building a little collection of moments I hadn't been part of. I'd look at her pictures at night trying to imagine what she sounded like, what it would feel like to hold her. Then, one afternoon, Douglas showed up at my house, out of nowhere. I was sorting through old photos for Cheryl when the doorbell rang, and there he was looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. I didn't know whether to hug him or scream, so I just said, "Come in." We sat on the couch in silence for a minute. Then he said, "Mom, I read your letter. I didn't realize how much this was hurting you." I wanted to believe him, but I was guarded. "Douglas, you let Sophia shut me out. You didn't even try to fight for me. How am I supposed to trust you?" He looked at his hands and said, "I'm stuck, Mom. Sophia's so mad about the court stuff, and I don't know how to fix it." I snapped before I could stop myself. "You're not stuck, Douglas. You're my son. You should be on my side. All I want is to be a grandma." He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. Then he said, "Her name's Lily." My granddaughter was Lily. I felt tears well up, but I swallowed them. "That's beautiful," I said. "Can I meet her?" He hesitated, then said, "Not yet. But I'm trying." It wasn't much, but it was the first real hope I'd had. After he left, I called Cheryl and told her everything. She said it was a good sign he was reaching out, but cautioned me not to get too hopeful. "He's torn between you and Sophia. We need to keep the pressure on in court." So we did. Cheryl had me rehearse my testimony until I could say it without breaking down. She also prepped me for Sophia's lawyer, who'd likely try to paint me as unstable or pushy. "Stay calm," she said. "Just tell your truth." I practiced in front of Karen, who played the tough lawyer, asking me hard questions to make sure I was ready. The hearing day came and I walked into the courthouse with Karen beside me, my stomach in knots. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, with Douglas, Sophia, their lawyer, and the judge all watching. When I took the stand, I told my story, how I'd raised Douglas alone, how I'd supported him, and Sophia, how I'd been blocked from Lily's birth for no reason. I talked about the teddy bear, the onesie, the love I had for a baby I'd never held. My voice wavered, but I kept going. Lisa testified about Sophia's lies, and Cheryl presented our evidence, the photos, the letters, the statements. Sophia's lawyer tried to tear me down, saying my Facebook post proved I was dramatic, and that I was disrespecting Sophia's parental rights. Cheryl shot back that Sophia had no valid reason to exclude me, and that her actions were cutting Lily off from a loving grandparent. The judge took notes through it all and said she'd need time to decide. I left exhausted, but feeling like we'd done everything we could. A few days later, Douglas called. I thought it was another update, but he said, "Mom, can you come over tomorrow? Sophia's out of town, and I want you to meet Lily." I almost dropped the phone. Was this happening? After all these months, was I finally going to hold my granddaughter? I said yes, my voice shaking, and spent the rest of the day in a daze. I packed a bag with the teddy bear, the onesie, a knitted blanket, feeling like I was gearing up for the biggest moment of my life. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with excitement and nerves. When I got to Douglas's house the next day, my heart was pounding. He opened the door, and there was Lily in his arms, tiny and perfect, with those big eyes from the photos. He handed her to me, and the second I felt her in my arms, I started crying quiet tears because I didn't want to startle her. She was so soft, so warm, and I whispered, "Hi, Lily. I'm your grandma." Douglas watched us, his face hard to read, but I didn't care. For that moment, it was just me and Lily, and nothing else existed. I rocked her, sang a lullaby I'd used with Douglas when he was little, and for the first time in months, I felt whole. But that moment didn't erase the bigger fight. When Sophia got back from her trip, she was furious. Douglas had let me see Lily. He told me she'd screamed at him, saying, "You went behind my back," and threatened to limit his time with Lily, too. It was a wake-up call for him. He started to see how far Sophia was willing to go to control everything. He didn't tell me this directly, but Lisa filled me in after hearing it from another cousin. It gave me hope that Douglas was starting to question things, but it also scared me. If Sophia was this angry, what would she do next? Holding Lily that day was like a balm for every wound I'd carried since the hospital. I spent an hour with her, rocking her singing, feeling her tiny hand wrap around my finger. Douglas didn't rush me, just sat there watching, and when I handed her back, I said, "Thank you, Douglas. This means everything." He nodded and said, "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start, and I held on to it like a lifeline. A week later, Cheryl called with the court's decision. I'd been granted visitation 1 weekend a month, and 1 day a week to start. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was a win. Cheryl said the judge had been convinced by our evidence of my bond with Douglas and the lack of any real reason for Sophia to cut me out. "This is a big deal, Madison. You've got a legal right to be in Lily's life now." I thanked her over and over, promising to send her a thank you gift because she'd fought so hard. When I told Karen, she whooped and said, "We're throwing a party." She came over with pizza wine and we celebrated Lily and the fact that I hadn't given up. Sophia didn't take the ruling well. Douglas told me she was livid, saying the court had no business in her family. She even talked about moving to another state to keep Lily away from me, but Douglas said he convinced her it wasn't practical. "She'll get over it," he said, but I wasn't so sure. Still, I had my visitation rights, and I wasn't going to let her intimidate me. I planned my first official visit with Lily, down to the last detail, buying toys, setting up a play area in my living room, baking cookies for Douglas, to make him feel included. I wanted everything to be perfect. That first visit was awkward, but beautiful. Douglas brought Lily over and stayed for a bit, watching as I played with her on a blanket. Sophia wasn't there, which was probably for the best. Lily was starting to smile, and every time she did, it felt like a gift. Douglas even chuckled when she grabbed my finger and held on tight. Before he left, he said, "This is good, Mom. I'm glad you're here." It was the closest he'd come to saying he was sorry, and I took it. Over the next few months, I built a routine with Lily. I'd pick her up for our visits, take her to the park, push her stroller, while I told her stories about her dad when he was little. I started a photo album for her, filling it with pictures of us together. Douglas got more involved sometimes, joining us for visits, and I could see him warming up to me again. But Sophia stayed cold. She'd barely look at me when I picked up Lily, and Lisa told me she was still telling people I'd forced my way into their lives. It hurt, but I focused on Lily, and the moments we shared. Then came a surprise. Douglas called saying he and Sophia were going on a weekend trip for their anniversary and asked if I could watch Lily for 2 days. I was thrilled but wary. Sophia agreeing to this didn't add up. "She's okay with it?" I asked. He shrugged and said, "She knows Lily's better off with you than a sitter." I didn't fully buy it, but I wasn't going to say no. Those 2 days were pure joy. Lily and I baked cookies. I baked, she played with a spoon, read books, napped on the couch. I took dozens of photos, feeling like I was making up for lost time. When Douglas picked her up, he looked at the pictures and said, "You're a great grandma, Mom." I nearly cried right there, but the peace didn't last. Sophia started pushing back again, trying to control the visitation schedule, saying Lily was too young for overnight stays. Cheryl said we could fight it in court, but I didn't want to escalate things yet. Instead, I kept showing up, for every visit being the best grandma I could. I bought Lily a little rocking chair for my house, started teaching her simple songs. She was growing fast, babbling now, and taking wobbly steps. Every milestone felt like a victory. Douglas and I were rebuilding our relationship, slowly. One day, he came over without Lily just to talk. He admitted he'd been wrong to let Sophia shut me out, but said he was trying to keep the peace at home. "It's not easy, Mom. She's stubborn, but I'm working on her." I appreciated his honesty, but I told him, "Douglas, I need you to stand up for what's right, not just what keeps Sophia happy." He nodded, but didn't promise anything. Still, it was progress, and I took it. The family dynamics were still tricky. Some relatives started inviting me to gatherings again, but others kept their distance, not wanting to upset Sophia. I didn't push them. I focused on the people who supported me, like Karen, Lisa, Brenda. I also started going to a support group for grandparents facing similar issues. Hearing their stories made me feel less alone and gave me ideas for handling Sophia's tactics. One day, I got a call from Sophia's mom, of all people. She said she'd heard about the court case and wanted to talk. We met at a coffee shop, and she was surprisingly kind. Sophia's protective of Lily, she said. But I think she's wrong about you. I'm sorry for how this has gone. It wasn't a fix, but it was a crack in Sophia's wall, and I thanked her for reaching out. She even suggested I send Lily a birthday gift through her, since Sophia might reject it otherwise. I did a soft bunny and a card, and Sophia's mom later told me Lily loved it. It was a small win, but it meant the world. Things aren't perfect, and I don't expect them to be. Sophia and I will probably never be friends, and that's fine. I don't need her to like me to love Lily. Douglas and I are still working on our relationship, but we're talking more, and that's enough for now. Lily's the heart of it all. She's my reason for fighting through the tears, the court battles, the family drama. Every time I see her smile, hear her giggle, watch her take a new step, I know it was worth it. I'm her grandma, the one who showed up, who loved her, who never gave up. And no one can take that away. If this story hit you, check out the next one on your screen. Click subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming. Thanks for being here.